Hello and welcome to Mayor's Corner. Today the Mayor's guest is Fire Chief Kevin Kraus. Let me first of all, before we get going, clarify something that we said at the last Mayor's Corner, and we said that our police department was formed in 1983. I misspoke on that, and I should have known better. I was there. It was 1981, and as recreation director, I had to conduct the agility tests for the new police department. And of course, they had to find the money as to how to fund that police department. And now, here we are in 2018, and it's a
different world.
It's a different world.
Yeah, it really is. And kind of what we're talking about. And thanks for the lead in and the correction there. You know, we were formed as a city government, incorporated as a city in 1970, as you know. The community was different then. You know, where I was living was more rural and farm, and when our citizens then voted on the charter in 1970, kind of set up the rules for government. So it set up the type of government we have, council members, clerk, treasurer, my office, what the responsibilities are, taxation. We're a 36 square mile community that has the airport in the center, so the taxation that was set up back then was limited at 10 mills by the charter. So the great thing about our government is that government can't raise taxes, can't change that.
Right.
Only the people can. So here we are, 2018, living in a different world. As you mentioned earlier, we formed a police department in 81, went to full-time fire in 99. So as we've, increased and enhanced those services as the community changed, here's where we are today, is that there really was no dedicated funding that was established back when we created the police or the fire department. So that it was different then. As you know, we had Wayne County Sheriff patrolling before we had our own PD. We had a volunteer system for fire before that. It's a different world today.
Yeah.
And so really what's really important now, and one of the biggest things we face, is that what goes to our general fund for those services. And if you think a general fund is really, it touches departments at City Hall, DPW, included police and fire services, many different departments, is that we have a huge portion of that general fund budget that now is dedicated in funding those services that have changed over those years. So that's part of the issue, and then there's other factors which I call it really a revenue issue, Dennis, is that we're faced with as well.
Chief Kraus, we relied heavily on volunteers up until 1999, which probably slowed us down a little bit as far as time to get to an incident, whether it's a fire or an accident or whatever. Do we still have volunteer fire department?
We have currently, our model is we have a combination department, Dennis, and that combination department is 15 full-time firefighters, and then we have some part-time firefighters that also substitute in and help us cover shifts. But you're absolutely correct. The model that we used to have with a volunteer department, if a call or a request for service came in, whether it was a fire or a medical, they'd call 911. The firefighters would have to leave their house, leave their job, go to the fire station, get the fire trucks, and then respond from the fire station to wherever the incident was. Currently, we have firefighters on 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Call comes in, they're already at the station. They're able to respond from the station anywhere in the city and get there in a significantly quicker amount of time than we used to get there during the volunteer model.
Now, does everything come out of your station, out of the headquarters, or do we have satellite stations?
So currently, all our firefighters run out of Fire Station 4, which is at Eureka and Middle Belt area, and then we have Fire Station 2, which is on the north end of the city, Ecorse and Middle Belt. Fire Station 2 is only run by firefighters that are off duty, and they respond back, and a couple of our part-time firefighters run our ladder truck out of Station 2 right now.
So, Mayor, tell us, we're understaffed, police and fire.
Yeah, it's a crucial issue, and here's why we're talking about it today, Dennis, is that this charter was established by law, says that we must provide those essential services which we need for society and for our community. So we all lived through, talk about dates and significant things that happened in history. Everybody remembers 2008 when the bottom fell out of the economy, and what happened, and a lot of people don't realize in local government, our main source of revenue is property tax, meaning real property that's owned by residential people, businesses alike. So those property values basically plummeted back in 2008. It took a few years for them to really bottom out and now start to creep up. And actually, just a couple of years ago, they finally bottomed out. What's significant about that piece is that lost value in property tax is lost revenue. And when I'm talking to people, if I'm just having a cup of coffee or at church or business people, and I ask them, their taxes they paid back in '08 compared to where it is now. If you own the same piece of property, like for example myself, what we were paying today is much less than what it was back in '08. So think about it. Everyone could answer that the same way and will, because if they've owned their property for the last 10 years, for residential or business. And so what happens is that lost revenue is the income and the revenue that the city uses to fund these essential services. So that's a significant date. What's different about it, and most people will say, well, Mayor, gosh, the economy's good, the jobs are strong, the market's strong, we should be okay. And the problem with that is, if people remember Proposal A, what happened is it capped the ability of inflation or 5% of those values going back up. So the problem won't fix itself. Basically, it's going to take us to 2041 before we ever get to where we were in '08 with those values. As Kevin will talk about later, the need and the demand that's there, it's not going to fix itself.
No.
The other major hit, and this isn't just a Romulus issue. We talk, and you network with other chiefs and other departments. All municipal government have faced that same issue. Okay, the other issue that a lot of local governments have faced is this revenue sharing issue. And think of revenue sharing as the state saying, we will give you, and we promise this money to you to share back revenue when they raise the sales tax. And so what's happened, and for Romulus alone, since 2002, we're minus $9 million that the state promised us. That, can you imagine what we could do with $9 million for these essential services? Yeah. So if you look at the values and the revenue sharing that's down, those two factors alone really makes it difficult to operate a city or municipal government. So those aren't things that are anybody's fault, Dennis. It's not our firefighters or police officers or workers. It's not our residents. It's not city council's fault or anybody's. That's a reality. That's the way the law is structured. That was done in Lansing. So now we've got to find other ways to do it. And so what a lot of communities are doing and are forced to do are to basically go to the taxpayers and fund these services. If it be public safety, police, fire millages, road millages, library millages, you see them, recreation millages, all over, every ballot, all over the state, because the state has put everybody in that position. So here we are. We're doing our best to make sure that we've been frugal with spending. We've done a lot of creative things. I really compliment Chief Kraus and his team, and on the police side as well. DPW, City Hall, we've been doing more with less for years. And to the fact where we are down so many employees, you can't cut your way to success. And so what we're going to be doing, and the residents are going to see in November, a very reasonable ask for us, is we're asking to have a dedicated portion of funding that will only be going to police and fire. It'll be, a locked-in amount. We're asking for a 5-year commitment, 4 mills, dedicated to those essential services. So that doesn't solve the whole problem, but that helps us sustain and be able to have Chief Kraus and his team be able to go out and do things they need to do. We've still got to continue to look for efficiencies and look for opportunities. Chief Kraus will talk a little bit about our SAFER grant we got, but that was just one. We've had, Joe Martin and his office, and we've had a grant writer come in, and we're really looking for any way possible that we can get grants from the federal government, from state or other sources, but even those won't solve it. So, we have to continue to work with our employees and try to be creative and find quicker, better, faster, more economic ways to do things. But let's not kid ourselves. This is very, very important. This is one of the most important elections of my whole career in local government. And it's very important because this is going to allow us to sustain these essential services for our residents that really deserve it. And what we're asking people really is get the facts. We're doing town halls, we're doing small groups, and It's something that is a very reasonable ask. What it's going to basically do in a nutshell is what your taxes are lower now from '08 to now. It'll probably bring us up into that range. We have data we can give them from the assessor that'll tell them the exact impact. The overall average for our community is about 42 cents a day is what it relates to. I know that people are, when I've talked to folks and even some seniors said, look, I'm on a limited budget. I'm on a fixed budget.
Right.
And any increase, any additional tax is a burden. And I get that. I don't like tax. You don't like tax. Nobody likes tax. But here's the thing. We're going to pay this anyway. These services that we're providing are so essential that if we don't, this could impact our ratings for our own personal insurance. So therefore, I rather fund the services rather than pay an insurance company because our rating's lower because we can't provide the residents the level of service that they really need. So to me, I was talking to another mayor from a different community, and they said, "Boy, that's a no-brainer, Burcroft. That's going to have no problem passing." I said, "Wait a minute, we don't have a good track record here."
No.
So
We haven't had a millage passed since 1970.
No,
correct?
we have not.
I mean,
So-
city, not school.
city, correct, on the city side, and I'm really proud of that because here, we've done a good job with the tax dollar. In fact, we have the second lowest city operating tax of any city in Wayne County, which is 43 communities. That's pretty cool.
Yes, it
That's a
is.
competitive advantage. We use that to market that, to bring business in. So we're doing very well with the budget that we have. We've been creative. We can't fix this problem without the residents' help. So that's why we're here talking about it. That's why we're doing town halls. That's why we have Chief Kraus and his team trying to tell people what I say is our story of what we're trying to do. And maybe you could tell them a little bit about, because I don't want people to hear, well, we got a SAFER grant, Chief, and we're good.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, Dennis, you brought up a really good question about, and back in '99 when we went to a full-time department, that was the first change in our operating model since the paid on call or volunteers were established when the city was established back in the 70s. And the reason for that change was we had a significant number of calls that went unanswered. We weren't able to provide the service.
Right.
So we made a service change and a model change, and we brought on full-time firefighters back then. And now here we are, that's 99, here we are 2018, almost 20 years later. And there's been another shift, and the shift is an increase in demand.
Right.
Romulus has grown. It's a small-town city, small-town feel, but we're seeing buildings go up. We have good economic growth going on. And with that growth comes an increase in demand. And if we look, Romulus compared to the nation, on average, most cities have one firefighter for every 1,000 to 1,200 residents. So with Romulus, we have between 23,000 25,000 residents in the city, and we only have 15 firefighters. So those 15 firefighters are seeing this huge increase in demand, and their utilization is very, very high. So we need to bring that number up to where we need to be.
And also, as of 2020, when we get the new census, it's going to show we've grown in the last 10
Right.
10
Yeah.
years.
So we're going to have
from
new
the
numbers, and
residential.
we may even see that. So it's really important because one of the things we're facing, and it's been a difficult as an administrator of our department, is with that high utilization, we see firefighter burnout. These firefighters are running, on average, about 15 calls in a 24-hour period, on top of making sure they're, getting in the schools and doing fire prevention stuff, getting out to our businesses and doing fire inspections and safety inspections for the businesses, and making sure we're doing our other, duties within the community. So it's really important. And the mayor had mentioned a SAFER grant earlier, and before I get to that, I really want to touch on, we've had a really successful year in the fire department. We've been able to write grants, and we're working with the Public Safety Foundation now and finding ways to support our public safety, our police and fire outside of just the general fund monies and being creative and thinking outside of the box. So, with all of those things combined, we're starting to move in the right direction to where we need to be, but we're not there yet. And, this millage is really going to help us establish that solid foundation. So as our city starts to grow, we're going to be able to grow with it and provide the services that are really needed. But we've had good successes. We've landed a grant from Beaumont Hospital that allows us to get some new cardiac heart monitoring equipment. We've landed a fire prevention grant through FEMA that's going to allow a company to come in and do a risk assessment and look at the model we're using and confirm what we're telling the public now, which is we need more resources, we need more firefighters, we need more stations open to support the increase in this demand that we see coming to our city. And then ultimately just now we've landed a SAFER grant, which is going to allow us to hire 5 more firefighters and bring our total number up to about 21 firefighters, which still isn't where we need to be if you look at 1 for every 1,000 individuals in the city. But all of these small successes together are getting us to where we need to be, and this millage alone doesn't get us there. The millage, the grants, the foundation, everything together, working together, are all the pieces of the puzzle start coming together and getting us to where we need. And I think it's important that the citizens understand the importance of having a very robust fire department, because as everyone's seen in the news as of recent, and even last year, the number of hurricanes, just a couple days ago, early this week, right? We had 3 tornadoes in surrounding cities in southern Wayne County and northern Monroe County. When those events happen, we don't have county resources. There's no county fire department. There's no state fire department. There's no federal fire department. When FEMA comes in and starts doing damage assessments and looking, they rely on our local fire department. Mm-hmm. We've had Michigan fire departments send resources down to the Carolinas for the hurricanes and stuff. They pull from other areas. So if we don't have a robust fire department to just service our daily needs, when those big incidents come up, we really won't have the resources to need, to take care of our citizens when those big things come up. So it's very important that we have that robust fire department. We have some redundancy there, and we're able to handle everyday needs and any catastrophic events that may happen. And so we're kind of the catch-all. When somebody picks up the phone and dials 911 for service, they're going to decide, is it a police issue or a fire issue? And if it's not a law issue, then it falls into our category, and we go out and assess the situation and help solve the problem or call for the appropriate resources. The other thing I want to touch on is how we work with the police department on a regular basis. This goes hand in hand. This is a public safety millage. It's not just the fire department millage. And if it wasn't for the police department showing up on scene for if it's a domestic issue or maybe it's an assault or something happens that we have to come in and evaluate somebody for a medical problem, they have to secure that scene before we can send our firefighters in there to check them out. So, this goes hand in hand. We can't do our job if police, can't be there to do their job, first. So, it's important on both sides of the fence in the public safety service model that police are there to do their part, we're there to support them and do our part, and we work together on a daily basis.
We talked about expansion in the city, new businesses coming in. We should be getting more taxes off of that, but it's more responsibility. The airport alone, the hotels. When I first moved to this community in 1977, we had about 4 or 5 hotels. I don't know how many we have now, but it's a bunch. And, that calls for the protection too. And like you say, if you have an incident, not only do you have to have a fireman there, fire department, a policeman, and part of your department also is you provide the paramedics and all that sort of thing for these incidents. And that's not a guy who jumps out with a helmet and boots on. That's a medical personnel.
Great point, Dennis. A lot of people don't realize that we're working towards being a full-service fire department, which means we handle anything that's on the fire side and fire-related, smoke alarms, CO2 alarms, any type of fires, vehicle accidents, any hazards, whether it's flooding or down power lines or gas leaks, any of that stuff. But we also offer EMS services, which a lot of people don't realize. And on the EMS side is the majority of the work that we do, because we see more requests for medicals than we do fire incidents right now. And the increase in demand with the airport's huge. Not only we've talked about serving our citizens and that 23,000 or 25,000 citizens, but we also have 18,000 badged employees at the airport that come in and out of our city every day. Right. Not to mention everybody that goes to the airport to travel and peak demands during Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up. We see a huge demand in car accidents and over the road hazards and stuff like that. the infrastructure with shipping and the stuff that comes in and out of our city because of the shipping, we see hazards with it as well. So there's a huge demand with that. Everybody that stays in the hotels, like you said,
Right.
the number of hotels are definitely up since 1970, and that also increases our demand. What's really, really neat is that over the last 4 or 5 years, we've established a great working relationship with the airport, and we have what's something called auto aid. So anytime that we have a fire in our city, the airport comes out of the airport's fire department comes out of the airport, and they help us with our incident that we have. And vice versa, we reciprocate that and give back to the airport by any time they have an aircraft coming in that might be having an issue. Maybe there's some smoke or an engine issue or landing gear issue. We send our fire trucks and our ambulance and we stage outside of one of the
Right.
gates. That way, if anything happens, we're ready for them. And, that's just a really, really neat agreement. It's thinking outside of the box. A lot of people have asked, hey, I saw an airport fire truck in my neighborhood,
yes.
or they were helping you with a fire. I've never seen that before, and that's just, again, one of those things that we're doing to work together with our neighbors, build more relationships, and really provide a better overall quality and level of service to the citizens of Romulus.
How many calls has the fire department, including your ambulance, make? Let's just go a week, a day.
So last year was a record year for us. 2017, we broke 5,000 calls in the year,
Wow.
which is huge.
Yes.
Compared to about 10 years ago, we were at about 3,000. So taking that number from 3,000 to 5,000 is a huge increase in demand, and we're not seeing that slow down at all. And there's a number of reasons for it. There's a number of explanations for it. But when you get down to the numbers, we still have to service them all. Every call that comes in, we have to provide service for. You had mentioned a lot of the good economic growth that we've seen with Mopar and Penske and Amazon. We're seeing 1,600 employees at Amazon right now. That number is going to grow to 2,400 over the next couple months before the holiday season. We're seeing a couple times, we've been there twice in a day for medical
Yeah,
responses.
we had a couple runs on one day last week.
Yeah, so we're seeing that just already from them being only partially about 60% in operation. We're seeing an increase in our service demand for that, and that's not going to go away. We have to get up there and service those calls. So we're seeing record numbers. We are already year to date compared to last year. We are already about 250 calls above last year's average. So
Now, every one of your calls, does that normally require a policeman to be there?
not every call, and it's different for us how many resources we send because it depends on the type of call, the severity of the call, the information that's coming into dispatch. But anytime we deal with a combative patient, or if we have a domestic situation where somebody may have been injured, or if we have in just an unknown situation, those are the type of calls that PD shows up on scene first. They make sure that the scene's safe for our firefighters to come in and provide the adequate care to whoever may be injured.
You talked about Amazon, just one of the many businesses we have here in Romulus. What is the impact on the average business person?
Well,
Yeah.
it impacts everybody. I think that's one thing that's really important. And my background's business, Dennis,
Right.
so I'm sensitive that we are working very hard and having good success, as Chief Kraus mentioned, with some of these big marquee names coming in. That's what the residents want us to do. They told us that in the visioning. So we're going to continue to do that. With that increased demand, you need to fund it, right?
Right.
And so actually with this proposal, it's really important for the residents to understand that 70% of this is going to go towards the businesses are going to pay it. So even though they may think, okay, well, 42 cents a day, that for an individual as a resident, that's an average for residential property. Businesses are by far going to pick up a bigger piece of it, and really they should. And it's not negative on the business. Actually, when I talk to businesses every week and I ask them about this particular proposal, they're for it. Because you know why? They want to take care of their employees, their customers, their building, their business, and they're investing in our community. So they want that business to be safe. I have got zero pushback from businesses on this at all. They're all for it. And a lot of times these Romulus businesses, they're Romulus residents working there also. So don't we want to keep them safe as well? So really, really important point is that 70% will actually fall on the commercial industrial businesses in our community.
That's a very good point, because a lot of people think, oh, it's just the
Right.
residents supporting the city. Well, that's not true.
And we really need the residents to support it, because some of the businesses that obviously don't live here, they can't even vote on this.
That's the whole
but
thing.
They want
Yeah.
it,
Right.
but
Yeah.
and they need it. So we really need the residents to understand that and to make sure that we're funding dedicated dollars for these essential services.
Seniors that have residents that have to pay additional tax, they have certain circuit breakers that help them. But a large amount of our seniors live in two buildings, and all they do is pay the rent, which is not going to go up because the millage went up.
Sure.
Is that correct?
Yeah, only really property owners. Think about it that
Right.
way. So this revenue that we're talking about comes from real property, land. So if you're a senior or you're not, and you don't own land and you're not paying it, you're not paying it all for that. You're not paying 42 cents a day. Talk about seniors, and we've done some really good meetings with some of the seniors, and it's important to listen to them. And they're probably a group that is more concerned about being able to pick up the phone, call 911,
Yep.
and get help. And so those are the golden years, right? Supposed
Yeah.
to be, and that's when they need those essential services. So when I'm talking at the senior towers or others, they're not paying any of that. They don't own the land, right? So
Right.
it's really only people that are paying for real property tax. But we need it, and it's really crucial for them. So, and even not just a senior, but anybody that's, if you're just renting, you're not, going to be paying that as well. The landowner who pays the city portion of the tax for that real property is where that responsibility will fall.
I think a lot of it too, agree on this, that we make an awful lot of runs to those two senior citizens.
That's what I was going
complex.
to point out. The mayor had highlighted that, the seniors that live in those buildings are really the ones that need this service. They're
Right.
getting older in age. They might have some medical problems or some issues that they deal with on a regular basis that are chronic, and or they become more severe a lot more quickly than maybe somebody that's younger. And when they pick up that phone and they make that phone call, they need the service and they need it now. When we look at our run responses to those two senior buildings, we are at those buildings at least every single day, if not multiple times a day between the two buildings. It's not uncommon. Our call volume in those two buildings are pretty significant, and rightfully so, because the population base in those buildings are really the ones that utilize our service quite a bit.
Chief Kraus, if this doesn't pass, you're going to have to continue on, but how difficult is it? I mean, you're understaffed, probably going to need more equipment, and probably be mandated to buy more equipment to service what we've got here in this community.
Yeah, so Dennis, right now I'm staying really positive. I think we have good community support. I think the fire department, the police department have done an excellent job serving the citizens up to this point. We want to continue to do that. So I'm really staying positive, and it's hard to think about the other side of this if this doesn't pass. And but the reality is you're right. We have an increased demand, and how do we service that demand if we don't have the resources to do it? And it means a lot of different things. It means that if we have multiple calls going on, that maybe one of those calls has to wait, and increased response time to citizens when they're in need, and not the same amount of firefighters on. We already are understaffed. I told you that, and you recognize that with the number of firefighters we have in ratio to our citizens, and that means maybe not as many firefighters per shift. We got to spread them out more, and so there's definitely negatives to this. Great things going on in the fire department. We want to continue to provide those high-level services to the citizens and move forward. So I'm staying positive. I'm trying not to think of the negative,
Right.
but it is a reality, and that is something that is tough decisions if we're not able to get this passed in November.
Yeah, the way I kind of would frame that one up, Dennis, is that we're going to have to look at the revenue and adjust it to our service model, right?
Right.
My plea to the residents are, please don't put us in a position. We want to serve you. We want to provide that service. We want to sustain what we have and do as well as we can. But don't put us in a position where we can't provide the service that our residents expect.
Absolutely. Mayor, people are saying, well, you got all this money to build a brand new courthouse.
Yeah.
Do you?
So, yeah, I hear a lot of things. I understand that the average resident may not understand how the budget works and where funding comes from. So let's talk about the court, for example. We're the host community for 34th District Court, which is governed through the state. And we're blessed to be that host community. We get additional revenue by being the host community. That court services Van Buren and Belleville and Sumter and Huron and Romulus, the airport, Metro Parks, all those areas. So they all funnel through the court. Just like we talked about with our increased demand, the increase in demand for all those communities, patrolling those interstates, the airport, that demand has gone up. And so really what's going on, the way I would frame it up to the average resident is, really the courts are building a court. And so here's what the judges did. The judges saw the increase in demand, and they made some calculations, and they looked at it and said, well, we need to build a new court. We can't handle the capacity that we currently have. So they put a fee in place through the court system, separate from our city funding, to basically pay the bonds for that building. So think of it as the court's building a court to handle their increased demand. The fees they put in place impact anybody that goes through that court system, not just our residents, not just our businesses. So I've heard people think that we're building a new city hall. It's not a city hall.
No.
We have a common parking area. So the campus here, which is city hall, library, and court, we're doing some things for enhancements to make it safer in the parking area with lights and so forth. But we're not building a new city hall where I have the same office, same desk that we've always had. But this is really essential for the courts to be able to operate and handle the increased demand that they have.
All right, Mayor, let's kind of wrap this up. Let's put everything right out in front in a nutshell. What's going?
Yeah, this is very important. Like I said, this is one of the most important elections in my lifetime here. And so, with the revenue loss that we've seen, with the property tax drop, with the revenue sharing, we're going to continue to work hard to find grants and creative ideas. This demand keeps going up as we change as a community. This issue, I need the residents to help us solve. So what we have is we have a proposal in November that's going to allow us for 5 years. And by the way, in 5 years, this ends. Mm-hmm. We're asking to let the residents give us a chance to prove ourselves. So in 5 years, we have to go back for either a renewal or some other version of this. This ends. This is not endless taxation, which I understand. So for a very reasonable amount, to let us provide those essential services. We're going to keep doing creative things. We're going to keep looking for grants. We have a great team of people working very hard for our residents, and I'm very proud of our fire and police services, as well as people at DPW, people at City Hall. This doesn't just impact those departments. This is really a health issue for our city. So please give us a chance to prove ourselves for 5 years, and we'll make sure we're good to that word.
We can go back 10 years when we started closing parks, and our employees had to take 1 day off, and all these. We don't want to go back to that, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've come a long way. When our team came in office, we had to rebuild parks, and we had no recreation, and we've tried to do a very good job, and we have, with public safety, enhancing the service as we've changed as a community just in the last 5 years with new growth. So we're going to continue. We don't want to go backwards.
No.
We can't go backwards. I mean, we need, as we grow as a community, these are, like I said, essential services. We're asking for a chance to prove ourselves, to make sure that the value is there. We believe it is, and we believe that still it'll keep us in a competitive situation for more jobs, for more growth. And but this isn't an issue that we can solve. We really need the residents to help us on this one.
This has been the Mayor's Corner, and we'd like to thank Chief Kraus for stopping by and sharing with us what goes on in our fire department. Thank you for watching.